What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, April 11th, 2017. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, hand hovering over the telephone, ready to put you on the air as soon as you call on in. And obviously, the rush to war being evidenced by the U.S. government is just frightening to behold. And we're going to be spending a lot of time on that here. Now, Putin has decided to take off the diplomatic gloves, and he's basically saying that this idea that Assad gassed his own people is an absolute lie to set him up to reverse the U.S. policy on Syria, which it has done. And Putin is warning there will be more. Basically, Putin is saying Russia's intelligence services are saying that the U.S. is going to drop chemical weapons on Damascus itself and blame Assad for it. And again, the same thing applies all over again. What is Assad's motive for doing that? He doesn't have one. It's just absurd on the face of it. But the corporate media is in locked goose step, pushing this whole agenda forward. And at this point, I'm in agreement with this article out of Southfront. The U.S. is pushing to a non-peaceful solution to the Syrian conflict. In other words, it's going to be war. We know there are U.S. armored forces, including heavy tanks, are on the Jordanian border with Syria. They could move on Damascus as well. Probably looking at a decapitation strike. Yesterday, Alex Jones was reporting there's a Marine amphibious landing ship just off the coast of Syria, near Damascus. And it looks like the thinking in D.C. is to just rush forward as fast as they can before any opposition to this war policy can be organized among the people. Now, Tillerson has again reversed himself on the situation with Assad. Assad has no future in Syria long term, and denying that they're involved in his ouster, even though that's exactly what they've been trying to do for 6 years. Now, Syria, Trump may have just started World War III. I don't think they can keep this under control. Trump has just committed himself to ratchet up attacks every time the White Helmets or anybody else stage a false flag chemical weapons atrocity or a barrel bomb atrocity. That just happened. And it'll be blamed on Syria. And Putin has declared he's had enough of this nonsense, and he's not backing down. This cannot end well at all. Now, Deputy Chairman of the Committee of the State Duma on Defense, Yuri Shvidkin, I got it. Yuri Shvidkin stressed that Russia will retaliate if any Russian military units in Syria are hit. And there are Russian military units all over Syria and around Damascus. Russia has responded by sending more warships to the port at Tartus, 2 corvettes, an ocean tug, and a fleet oiler. Everybody's just pushing up, pushing up, pushing up. Now, there is a little glimmer of calmness coming on out. This is an article coming out of RINF.com. And apparently Donald Trump is realizing that he got played. And he's trying to push back against the neocon plan for an outright invasion of Syria. And this is also coming out of InfoWars, basically saying sources are telling InfoWars Trump is very reluctant to see any more U.S. troops embroiled in yet another Middle East quagmire, but he's under pressure from the neocons in his administration to prevent Russia from dominating the region as the fall of ISIS nears. We can't let Russia get in there. You know something? Let's take all these neocons, give them rifles, jumpsuits, parachutes, drop them on Moscow, let them have all the fun they want. The problem I have is they sit safely at home in lives of comfort and security, demanding to send your children out to fight people they think are their enemies. But Trump is apparently pushing back. None of this has played out well. It's looking more and more like what happened was that the Syrian attack on the rebels accidentally touched off a storage depot where they had chemicals, not sarin, but chemicals like chlorine. And, of course, what happens when you bomb chemical weapons? They burst into the sky, get caught on the wind, and people got killed. And this was seized on as, oh, we can say Assad is gassing his people again. And again, the story did not hold up for that very simple reason. Assad is on the verge of winning his war against the U.S.-backed rebels. Peace talks were starting in Brussels to bring this thing to a complete end, and almost 2 weeks ago, the White House was saying it was okay with them if Assad remained in power. It was just a political reality they were prepared to accept. So Assad had absolutely no reason to carry out a gas attack or anything else that is going to upset the progress he's made. Obviously, the war hawks benefit from this. The U.S.-backed rebels benefit from this, but not Assad. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates rejoining our network, and we're talking about this insane rush to wars in Syria and probably North Korea as well. Now, yesterday, the White House set a new red line for Bashar al-Assad, not to drop any barrel bombs. And so, of course, just a couple hours later, we're getting a report from the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights that's saying Syrian government warplanes dropped barrel bombs on rebel-held areas, and oh my goodness, the civilians and the slaughter. Now, obviously, Syria is saying, no, they're not doing that. And moreover, they're saying they don't use barrel bombs. Now, in case you don't know what that is, a barrel bomb is an improvised bomb. And it's just, as the name says, it's a barrel filled with explosives and shrapnel and whatever else they're going to throw in there, and it's just dropped from straight overhead. It's an unguided munition, and it's considered indiscriminate, like an improvised IED. Now, the reality is, this Syrian Observatory for Human Rights is a Western propaganda operation. It's run out of a one-bedroom home in Coventry, England, by a man who has not actually been in Syria for the last 12 years, and when he's not putting out anti-Assad propaganda, he runs a T-shirt store. A very, very credible intelligence source that's going on. Now, the barrel bombs have a long history. They were first used by the Japanese when they started running out of more properly manufactured munitions. But it is a dumb bomb. And it doesn't have fins, and it's just dropped from straight overhead. But it's a favored propaganda tool to say Assad is dropping barrel bombs on his people, because when you find the shrapnel and the debris, there's no clue who actually made it or where it came from. It's another false flag. They're going to keep doing these until they get the war they want. And everybody's trying to figure out what the heck is going on. We have different people within the U.S. government saying completely different things. Article over in Blacklisted News. Is there a new U.S. Syria policy? Is there one at all? It just seems like it's in thrash mode. And like I said, we're hearing about this story from InfoWars that there is a major debate, to put it politely, going on in the White House. Donald Trump has realized he's made a huge, huge mistake. Because if he doesn't actually have proof Assad did the chemical weapon attack, and he launched that strike into Syria, it's an international war crime. And if they come on back and say, well, we made a mistake. When Syria blew up the chemical depot and it killed people, we just assumed it was... And again, it portrays Donald Trump and the U.S. government hitting the war button without careful consideration. It displays an incredible recklessness. And this has got to be alarming to other people, especially other nuclear nations. If this thing starts to edge toward a nuclear exchange, other nations are going to be more disposed to hit that button because they have no idea if there's any restraining forces left in the U.S. government. Now, apparently, a CIA document has surfaced showing U.S. plans to destroy Syria, destabilize Syria, and even Sean Spicer had a slip of the tongue in the press conference and said that's the purpose of the war, is to destabilize Syria. Then he corrected it and said, we're going to destabilize the conflict, which doesn't actually make any sense. But this 1983 document shows basically all the way back in 1983 when Bashar al-Assad's father was running the place. They wanted him out. They wanted all connection between Russia and Syria severed, and Syria brought into the U.S. sphere of influence. So this has been going on for a very, very, very long time. We're going to take a phone call now. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I have been examining this intellectually as much as I can do it, and I've come to the conclusion that this was, our foreign policy has always been driven by Israel. This has always been about Israel, even back since Hafez al-Assad, who, by the way, contributed, and there was a Syrian division that fought right alongside us against Saddam Hussein in 1991. But we were allowed to rendition people there. That, you know, he was not religiously affiliated. The Ba'athist movement, you know, completely non-religious. But they happened to be, in order to survive, they had to, being around Israel, they had to align with Russia. And, of course, you're on Israel's border, and the policy has always been to destabilize everything on Israel's border. A chaos theory that they could expand into it. But the timing, I'm convinced, is because of the Susan Rice getting calls to testify, and where the surveillance state is being shown to intrude into our elections in a huge way, and even Obama being called to testify or calls for him to testify, and this coming into the open, and all at once that's disappeared. So this may have been on the table since 1983, but it's to deflect away from the deep state. It's to deflect away from the intelligence community, running everything, surveilling everything, trying to blackmail and control the president. That's what this is all about, in my opinion.
Well, I tend to agree with you. We've seen the media manipulated by staging an event to distract from another event. When the Marine barracks in Beirut were bombed and all those people were killed, 24 hours later the U.S. invades Grenada, and the Beirut story just vanishes from the corporate media. When Monica Lewinsky was testifying about the stay in blue dress for Congress, she walked out expecting a phalanx of reporters on the Capitol steps, and it was just empty because while she was testifying, Clinton launched cruise missile attacks into Sudan and one other country, I forget, blew up an aspirin factory, which the taxpayers ultimately had to pay to rebuild. But as far as the gas attack in Idlib, I'm starting to lean more and more to Syria and Russia's explanation that it was actually an accident, that they bombed what they thought was just a rebel base, and it turned out to be a clandestine storehouse for the chemicals that the rebels have been using on the Syrian people. But always politicians are thinking about any event, how can I use this to push the agenda? And certainly for people like John McCain, this was like a gift from the heavens falling into his lap, where he could run to the White House and say, see, Assad is gassing his people, launch the war now. And unfortunately, Trump got bowled over by it. And was probably being told that polls were showing. Well, we're even seeing in the corporate media today, they're putting out polls claiming that Americans are supporting Donald Trump, that they absolutely love him. I have yet to meet a single person who thinks that this is a good idea. I've yet to meet a single person who is buying this story that Assad is gassing his own people, because it just doesn't make any sense. But they may have told Donald Trump, Americans will back you with this strike into Syria, and by looking at social media, I'm sure his staff has realized that no, he's pretty much destroyed his base, and he's turned himself into a single-term president. It wasn't just the airfield Trump bombed, it was his own credibility, the credibility of his administration, and his chances at a second term in office.
Well, Mike, he's traded Soros and the Democratic Party, and it's the draining the swamp that had all the Soros people and the intelligence community and the Democrats in a tizzy, and now all that's been reversed. All you had to do was deflect, go with the war strategy that, of course, financed by the Zionists in Israel, but go along with the strategy, get everything, away from the deep state and Susan Rice and all that other stuff. And that's what they're doing. It's just, anything but that. I mean, that's their base of power. The banks and the fact that they control the media, which now is almost friendly to Trump.
Yeah,
at least about this.
Yeah, well, what an amazing turnaround. I mean, all these people who were savaging Trump during the campaign are now his buddy. McCain's his buddy. Pelosi's his buddy. And they're, as long as you're in favor of endless war, you are a hero to the establishment, because that's what the establishment is about: war and conquest. Every election we vote for lower taxes and peace. We never get it, no matter who we vote for. We are always going to get higher taxes and more war, because that's what the establishment survives on.
This morning, by the way, just to let your viewers know, I called up Tulsi Gabbard's office. I called up the DNC and Nancy Pelosi's office, and basically said, "What's wrong with you? She's the only credible person on the right track," and blah blah blah. And they're trying to pillory her. But even a month ago, what she was saying was sort of acceptable. Now it's not.
Oh yeah, the establishment is closing ranks. They know they're in trouble. They know they've lost the trust and faith of the American people. So they're just going to close ranks and ram the war agenda forward as hard as they can before there's an organized push back against it by the American people, which is already starting to happen. They're already protesting the streets. Hands off of Syria. Stop lying to us. And it's starting to build. And of course, you're not going to see that on the corporate media. So if any of you are participating in any such kind of a protest or march, send me the pictures and videos, and I will post them here and talk about it on the radio show.
We need to withhold our tax checks in 4 days, Mike.
Sounds good to me.
Protest.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, there's no other way. These guys otherwise they'll kill us.
Yeah. So. Well, they're going to kill a lot of our children and a lot of other people's children.
Yeah. Yep. Thanks, Mike. I'll let you. I know you got other callers. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. Now then, something that we need to keep hammering is all the evidence of U.S. government involvement in the chemical weapons in Syria. And we posted a link to one of the WikiLeaks document drops. It's a State Department email in which Hillary Clinton is saying, the best way we can guarantee Israel's safety from Iran is to overthrow the government of Bashar al-Assad. And the groupthink phenomenon is evidence there because Iran is not a threat to Israel. It's actually the other way around. Iran has not initiated a war of conquest against another country in 200 years. That's certainly something that Israel cannot say and the United States cannot say. And we need to keep reminding everybody of that reality. Forget about who's supposed to be doing wrong and all these horrible things. Look at the nations that are actually doing the invading, the bombing, the drone striking, the regime change. It is very obvious to the objective observer who the aggressors are in this new rush to a new world war. And we need to keep repeating that story where Seymour Hersh came on out and documented Hillary Clinton approved the sale of sarin nerve gas to the Syrian rebels. They're the ones who have the gas, and they've been using it, both in 2013 and 2014. When we were told by the corporate media that Assad was gassing his own people, UN chemical weapons inspectors came back both times and said, no, it's the U.S.-backed rebels. So, article out of War is a Crime. 24 ex-U.S. intelligence officials have sent a letter urging President Trump to rethink his claims blaming the Syrian government for the chemical deaths in Idlib and pull back from this dangerous escalation with Russia. Trump is raising on a busted flush here. Nobody is buying that Assad gassed his people. He had no reason to. And we know the U.S. lies about weapons of mass destruction to start wars. That's what they did. Saddam's nukes, good example. Assad gassed his people, Chapter 1. Assad gassed his people, Chapter 2. How many more times do you have to be lied to until you stand up and say, I will not be lied to anymore by this government and this corporate media? We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, do you remember way, way, way back when Saddam Hussein was friends with the U.S. government And he fought a war against Iran on behalf of the United States following Iran's kicking out the Shah, deciding they wanted to run their own country, during which Iraq apparently killed somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 people with poison gas. And recently declassified CIA documents reveal that the U.S. government helped Saddam use those chemical weapons on Iranian civilians. So the U.S. does not really have any moral standing to point fingers at anybody else. Up in Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is leaping onto the bandwagon saying the Russians are to blame for the Syrian chemical attack because obviously Russia failed to keep them out of the hands of Bashar al-Assad, and we have to all be part of a solution. He's not volunteering himself. Justin, here's your rifle. Here's your parachute. Go have fun. All you people who think war is great, go on and fight your war. Just, we don't want to be part of it anymore. Now, Rex Tillerson, in getting off the airplane over there in Moscow, was thumping his chest and bellowing into the jungle and issuing an ultimatum to Russia that they must choose between the United States and Syria. It's the old, if you're not with us, you're against us. And that was exactly the wrong thing to do against the Russians in general and Putin in particular. Putin is not backing down, and even more interestingly, Putin is refusing to see Tillerson. Kremlin officials are saying Putin has no intention of meeting with Tillerson at all. Tillerson will be allowed to meet with Sergei Lavrov, but that will be it. So Tillerson's going to come home with his hat in his hand. That's basically about it. Now, the lies have hit the flood stage at this point. If you've got a pair of hip waders somewhere in the closet, it's time to put them on because the bovine excrement has just piling up. The Pentagon held a briefing in which they're claiming a 100% success. They're claiming all 59 missiles hit their intended targets in Syria. See, our weapons are mighty, our weapons are amazing. Well, if we take the Pentagon's word at face value, which is always a stupid thing to do, then the U.S. intended to kill civilians and children in the villages of Shayrat, Al-Hamrat, and Al-Manzil, where some of those 100% perfect cruise missiles came down. Remember Operation Desert Storm, the first invasion of Iraq? They were talking about how the Patriot had a better than 95% success rate against the Scud missiles. And then after it was all over and they started looking at the data, more and more people said, I don't think it really worked that well. And the government came back and said, would you believe it was 75%? And the American people said, no, we wouldn't believe that either. And then the government came back and said, would you believe it was 50%? And the American people said, maybe, but we're not even sure about that. The military always lies. Remember when the gun turret on the USS Iowa exploded? Because the gun propellant had been improperly stored and was unstable, and they blamed a gay sailor for it. Oh, he committed suicide. He deliberately... That's what they do. That is what they do. You want to talk about lies and cover-ups and whoppers, look at Israel's attack on the USS Liberty. They're still fighting tooth and nail to keep that story in place. Now, the U.S. is claiming they hit over 100 of Syria's aircraft and reduced their effectiveness by 20%. Of course, Syria and Russia, and even the after-action drone photos are showing, no, it wasn't. The U.S. got 9 aircraft, 6 of which were antiques. Vietnam-era MiG-23s, which may have been sitting at that airport because they're not actually usable anymore. But the U.S. always lies about what's going on in war. Truth is the first casualty of war. We didn't learn how many of our young people had died in Vietnam until after it was long over. Okay, we're coming up here on another commercial break, and we're going to come back with... They're just flinging the lies in the hope that people will say, well, with so much smoke, there must be a fire. There isn't. There's just smoke. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Well, the bovine excrement is exploding out of Washington, D.C. and the corporate media. There's so much of it, I've actually worn out my little egg timer, and I need to order another one off of eBay. And now, coming out of Associated Press, according to a senior U.S. official who must remain unnamed, of course, Russia knew that Syria was going to carry out this gas attack on the civilians of Idlib and refused to do anything about it, and then worse, tried to bomb the hospital where the victims were being treated to cover up this horrendous crime. And if you believe any of that one, I've got some of Saddam's nuclear weapons to sell you. But let's get on down to the basics. Right now, Donald Trump is in violation of international law. He's in violation of the Constitution. He's in violation of the UN Charter because he carried out an unprovoked attack on a sovereign nation that had not attacked us. And worse, he is now seen to have done so on the basis of inaccurate information, which betrays a high degree of recklessness. And that's a very lousy quality. It does not mix well with the office of the President of the United States of America. And apparently, the intelligence community did know there wasn't Syria did not drop a military chemical weapon on innocent civilians. Even our own intelligence agencies are starting to say, yeah, Syria bombed a rebel base where they were secretly storing chemicals for chemical weapons, and that's what happened. Or it was an intentional false flag. Either way, does not matter. Donald Trump ordered an attack on another country on the basis of incomplete, inaccurate information, and that's going to scare every other government on earth. The world just became much more dangerous. Even China, which is still trying to get this trade deal going, and apparently the quid pro quo was China is going to help tamp down on North Korea in exchange for trade concessions. But even they've come on out and said, we have to preserve Syria's sovereignty, and they're opposing the use of military force against Syria. Dennis Kucinich is asking, why are we helping ISIS, which has made gains in Syria since Donald Trump bombed that airfield? Now, Dennis needs to do a little more research. He would find out that ISIS has actually been covertly working for U.S. interests all the way back into the Obama administration, especially under Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Now, Tulsi Gabbard, despite this intense pressure from her own party to shut up, is openly demanding Trump provide the evidence to justify the Syria strike. Show us the evidence you have that Assad had anything to do with this. And the corporate media is out there saying they know Assad gave the order himself directly. Next they're going to say Assad flew the mission himself after that whopper about having an Air Force general fly a combat mission in Syria. Show the evidence. Well, Tulsi, you're going to be waiting a very long time because there isn't any. The story just does not make sense. And I'm delighted to see Tulsi standing up against all this pressure. Because somebody has to. Somebody has to take a stand against this insane rush into a new world war. Because they're not going to be able to keep it under control. The military-industrial complex is saying, well, we're going to morph this into a Cold War, and there won't really be a lot of fighting, and there won't really be a lot of death, but we'll make a lot of money. Look how close we came during the last Cold War of it turning into a hot war, and realize just what a dangerous game this is. Now, the White House is out there saying that the America First foreign policy justifies strikes against those who gas babies. Okay, well, the United States gassed a church full of women and children down in Waco, Texas with a banned chemical weapon. So I guess that means you're going to bomb yourself? Or did you just open your mouth and stick your foot into it? And speaking of which, earlier today, Sean Spicer was in the press room out there bashing on Assad and screaming about Assad gassing his own people. And he made the statement, I'm not kidding you, Hitler didn't sink to using chemical weapons. So I guess the White House has just admitted that this story of the Nazis gassing 6 million Jews, Poles, gays, mentally retarded is a myth. I'm okay with that. And that means that all of that American tax money that was illegally given to Israel in violation of the Boland Amendment and the Glenn Act needs to be refunded immediately. Now, needless to say, everybody on Twitter and social media, they're taking Sean to task over what a ridiculous statement he just made. He's just blown his own credibility. And he's trying to come on back and say, well, you know, what I meant was, there's no way out of this one, Sean. You blew it. Your brain was not in gear when you opened your yap. And I know it's a difficult job. I've seen that job destroy people who have it. Dee Dee Myers, for example. Major alcoholic problem after she had that job. Now then, a while back, there was a case where a NATO country conducted a Syria-related raid and captured enough sarin gas to kill 200,000 people. And it's very finely documented. They had all the material. A trial was held, evidence displayed, the perpetrator was convicted. But then it turned out the perpetrators were Western-backed moderate rebels, and they were set free, and the corporate media never reported this. That the Western-backed rebels had enough sarin gas to kill 200,000 people. No big deal. Not worth talking about. Story over at theduran.com. Every time John McCain makes a secret trip to Syria, chemical weapons attacks follow. And a lot of people have noticed that timing. McCain will go to Syria, even though his job description is in Arizona. And shortly thereafter, there's one of these false flag gas attacks. Coincidence? I think not. There's photos of McCain with these leaders of ISIS. They're all over the web. You can do a web search for them. Now, over in RINF.com, Vijay Prashad is providing an analysis why U.S. troops will be fighting alongside a coalition of opposing allies to retake Raqqa. In other words, there's now a fight over Raqqa, and the U.S. is fighting again on the side of the moderate rebels. Your kids are now bullet catchers in Syria. Have you not had enough of this over the last 20 years? Now, meanwhile, foreign ministers from Iran, Syria are going to Russia. They're going to meet with Medvedev up there and basically try and figure out where they're going to go from here. Because I think they understand that the U.S. is gunning for them. It's obvious in the rhetoric. It's obvious in the very reckless way Trump launched the cruise missile attack. War is coming. And they need to get ready for it. And by the way, so do you. Now, Donald Trump and Theresa May are agreeing to try and convince Moscow to stop supporting Bashar al-Assad. It is not going to happen. See, Russia has a reputation of standing by their allies. Not so the U.S. And again, go back when Saddam was making war on Iran, he was our friend. Then he was our enemy. He started selling his oil for the euro instead of the dollar. Take him out. Put in a new government. Right now, in this day and age, the United States government is the least trusted government on earth. And Donald Trump just acted like a wild man with this harebrained cruise missile attack. We've broken so many treaties, nobody trusts the word of the government anymore. Everybody knows our corporate media is lying. And this thing is spinning out of control. Robert Kennedy Jr. has taken a pause out from his vaccine campaign to see Syria is just another proxy oil war, another war for pipeline rights of way. Now, over in Iran, one of their advisors to the foreign minister is saying Iran is not going to allow the U.S. to change equations in Syria, pointing out that a single cruise missile attack, as damaging as it was, does not change the reality of where the Syria war is. Because the lesson from Vietnam is you cannot win a war from the air. To control the territory, you must have military on the ground. And the neocons are talking about sending 100,000 troops into Syria. 100,000 of your kids going on into another country to be shot at, to be killed and crippled, to make already rich bastards richer still. And yes, there's some bitches in there too. I'm sorry if I offended the feminists. Yes, feminists, you have as much right and ability to be evil as the men do. Now, Iran is out there saying it is time to have a complete investigation into what actually happened at Idlib. Everybody wants an investigation except for the United States, which is out there saying, no, we already know. We have classified information. We can't share it with you, but we know that's exactly what happened. I figure if there's any more calls for an investigation, the U.S. is going to go on in and just bomb the place into dust. They actually did that. Remember when they accidentally shot up a hospital, or maybe it wasn't even accidental, and people wanted an investigation as to what had happened. The U.S. went back in and flattened the place. Yeah, we can have an investigation, but gee, sorry, we just bombed the place into dust last night. Golly gee shuckies, our bad. Now, new evidence has surfaced, and this is a YouTube video. We put it up on whatreallyhappened.com. The Saudi-led coalition, which is acting as a U.S. proxy in Yemen to slap those people down and get them to accept their U.S.-approved government, is using banned cluster bombs in Yemen. This is a banned weapon under international convention. Guess who they're getting the cluster bombs from? So once again, we see this hypocrisy and double standard of the United States where they're out there bemoaning that, oh, Assad may have been using a banned weapon here, but it's okay for us to use it on the church. And he's using these illegal weapons like white phosphorus, but it's okay to give, cluster bombs to Saudi Arabia to kill the Yemenis with. If you're going to have international law, everybody must comply with it. We can't have any nation, whether it's Israel or the United States, seeing themselves as above international law. That is a recipe for a global disaster. Now, Leon Panetta is out there declaring a new red line in North Korea. Now, most people would say common sense would be that if North Korea actually attacks somebody, like South Korea, Japan, Guam, U.S. military base, that's the red line that you respond to. Panetta's moved that. Panetta is now saying that merely testing of an ICBM by North Korea is the red line. If they do that, the U.S. will go on in. The U.S. is testing ICBMs all the time. Nobody talks about invading us because we're testing our missiles. The U.S. justifies its nuclear arsenal and its ICBMs by saying it deters outside aggression. Why does not North Korea have that same right to deterrence? All these nations are merely responding to the obvious provocations and aggressions of the U.S. government. Now, North Korea is warning the United States that they will respond to this battle fleet centered on the Carl Vinson, which is now approaching the coast of North Korea. Because of what Donald Trump just did in Syria, North Korea has every reason to expect that the U.S. is just going to haul off and invade. They'll just make up some kind of a lie. Kimchi causes sterility or something. Send in the bombers. So that's a flashpoint. Now, the other day I was talking about what Korea could actually do. And there's a bit of a game changer, because apparently North Korea has succeeded in constructing at least one, possibly more, of a very simple ballistic missile submarine called the Gore, or Whale. NATO calls it the Sinpo class. And there is one that is known to be operational, and there appears to be another one already being constructed. Now, it's certainly not the country killer that the Ohio class is. It appears to be a refinement of the old Soviet Gulf-class submarine, which has 2 vertical launch tubes in the submarine sail. So the submarine can carry 2 nuclear-tipped missiles, and they're developing a missile to go with it called the KN-11. Have not had the best record of success testing it. But I'm sure they're working to get the kinks out of it. And with this submarine, obviously they can extend the range of retaliation in the event of an attack. We have a very reckless president. We have a very reckless government. We have a military-industrial complex that loves war because war turns your children's blood into their gold. And that's a bad, bad formula for the future of the human race. Now, getting on back to whether or not our military really can project power the way it used to, or is it all a giant bluff? Apparently, the Air Force is having a major problem as their best pilots are reaching retirement age, the end of their commitment to the Air Force, and they're leaving to get jobs in the airline industry, although probably not United Airlines at the moment. And so now they're talking about stop loss again. About, yes, I know we said that you could leave here. We've changed our mind. You must stay. And remember how many riots broke out on U.S. Army bases when they were using stop loss in Iraq. A lot of violence broke out. It was always blamed on some convenient Muslim. But apparently that's a big problem. Now they're going to try and find some of the solution, like paying the pilots more. But I'm sure those pilots are all looking at current events and saying, you know, it's one thing to be flying around on training missions and patrols. We're getting ready to actually go into real combat, and that's not a very pleasant prospect. Now, our corporate media continues to promote these baseless assertions of Russian interference in our elections, hacking the DNC, even though WikiLeaks has now come on out saying that Guccifer 2.0 confirmed it was a leak from Seth Rich. But that's the media's job, to fill your head full of nonsense, to get you to believe what the government needs you to believe so they can take your money and your children to play their little global war games. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go ahead and take a phone call from Carrie in British Columbia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How are you?
Hanging in there, looking out the window for mushroom clouds.
Yeah, I know. I can see it in your face and hear it in your voice, but I think everybody's angry. Me being a Canadian, you know, I supported, Trump, and it was kind of amazing to see him win, but, you know, all those hopes have kind of been dashed now, and I think everybody should come to the realization that, it's the same old, same old. My concern, though, I think, looking at the so-called enemy's position, looking at Russia and China and everything else, I think maybe they thought there was some hope there with Trump as well, but I think those hopes have been dashed, and maybe there's going to be a preemptive strike coming from them, and coming to North America, bringing it right here. And I know there's a lot of gun owners and stuff like that in the United States, unlike Canada, other than hunters. Like we have hunting rifles up here and that kind of thing. Handguns are really restricted. And but I think that Canada's open. We've got less than 40 million people here. We're a multicultural society that has a lot of very loyal people. There's a lot of people that are very loyal to China. I'm sure there's people here that are loyal to Russia, Ukraine, all these other countries in the Middle East as well. And we used to talk about this 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that, I wonder if there's any Chinese sleeper cells here. We got containers coming in here. I know of people that have bought SKS submachine guns, and they're from China, and, big kind of giant crates of ammo and stuff like that. And, I'm more worried about, Canada's kind of wide open, and like for them to come in and invade and maybe have a
Well, wait a minute. Right now, I don't think Russia and China or anybody else sees Canada as a problem. The Canadians are not threatening. Yes, they've been involved in wars, but they've always been somebody else's wars. If there is an attack on the United States, I think it's going to stay on the U.S. side of the border. They don't really have a reason to go after Canada.
Well, I understand that.
I think you're
getting a foothold, though. In North America, Canada would be a good place to get a foothold. And that's my concern because.
Well, you're looking at this from the wrong point of view. First of all, nobody is coming to invade the United States. It's like all this ridiculous talk about how Putin wants to invade the U.S. and Europe. Look at the condition the U.S. and Europe are in. They're broke, hopelessly in debt. They've got all kinds of internal problems. The infrastructure's rotted away. Putin doesn't need those problems. He doesn't have a reason to invade the U.S. What every nation does have is a need to defend themselves against U.S. aggression, because that's what's been going on for the last almost quarter of a century, is the U.S. picking off countries, changing their government to try and take control of the world. And everybody has a right to defend themselves against that. But nobody's coming to physically invade either Europe or the United States, and certainly not Canada. Anyway, we've got to take a break for station identification. Thank you very much for the phone call. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. And before I go back to the phone calls, a couple of things I want to cover here. Do you remember before the big war in Iraq, where they were running around screaming about Saddam Hussein's nuclear weapons, and Saddam Hussein has this and Saddam Hussein has that, none of which was ever found? It turned out that Saddam Hussein had complied with the United Nations and destroyed all of his chemical weapons, which he had actually gotten from the United States during the Iran-Iraq war, and he never had nuclear weapons. Well, Scott Ritter was the former UN weapons inspectors who went public before the Iraq war saying, this is all false. These claims about weapons of mass destruction are false, and he was pilloried for it. He was smeared. Well, he's back out again, and he's saying the same thing. Assad did not launch a chemical weapons attack on his own people. It just does not make any sense. Now, let's get on back to this idea of North Korea and nuclear weapons and so forth and so on here. And again, you need to remember, with all this talk about Iraq's non-existent nuclear weapons and Iran's, well, they don't have them, but they might build them someday, nuclear weapons, and North Korea's nuclear weapons, which don't work all that well and are not yet deployable, you need to remember that there's only one nation in all of history that's ever actually used a nuclear weapon of mass destruction against the civilians of another country, and that's the United States of America. So everybody's going to be very nervous about a nation with a past history of using nuclear weapons being run by a government that has already displayed an incredible recklessness and a willingness to launch attacks on the basis of fantasies. But the reality is, let's say that North Korea has got a nuclear weapon. As North Korea itself has said, these are deterrent weapons. They're not being used to attack anybody, but to warn other countries, do not attack us. The U.S. government has always claimed that our nuclear arsenal is purely for deterrence. Nobody will attack us, we can melt them down. Well, assuming that our nuclear deterrent is in better shape than the F-35, we can rely on that. Saddam, if he'd had a nuclear weapon, what was he going to do with it? Put it in a museum, march it down the street in a parade and say, look how good we are? He was never going to use it against the United States of America, because the United States retaliatory strike would melt his country into glass. The same thing applies to North Korea. For all his bluff and bluster, and again, everything we think we know about Kim Jong-un is what the corporate media tells us. He could actually turn out to be a very nice guy. We went through that lesson with Ahmadinejad. He's not going to use a nuclear weapon against the United States of America unless he's provoked, unless he's attacked, and he's fighting back. Okay, let's grab a couple of phone calls. Jonathan in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I hope you're having a good day.
Yeah.
Yes, I had a, I know, but let's try. You know, positivity is always good. Never hurt.
So, what's on your
Hello?
mind? Yeah, what's on your mind? You're on the air.
Yes. I had one piece of news and actually a solution after that. You know the website Newsbud, right? Where their YouTube channel had this interesting video called "Is the U.S. military planning to take over America?" And it's about, I guess the Pentagon wrote a new doctrine for megacities, and it basically it's basically going to plan like you see in Iraq. It's basically the citizens of these mega cities are to the Pentagon, not combatants but threats. You know what I'm saying? And they're basically, the whole RD is, it doesn't matter, like full-fledged total war in these cities. And it's just interesting. If you watch that video, it's a lot of like eye-opening stuff, you know, about how the military, and it basically ties in, you know, the police militarizing and the how they're treating every civilian like a threat. But that's just an interesting video to put on your website.
Well,
and then I have
you know, that sounds kind of. If you'll send me the URL, I will look at that and see. There's a lot of plans out there right now. I think we need to keep our focus basically on the very near future and the very real possibility. We're going to be in a shooting war with Russia, North Korea, potentially China, because from where I'm sitting, they're not going to be able to keep this under control. They're not going to be able to go to war light and say, we're going to stop here and just sneer at each other and bleed our respective populations of all their money, you know, because we like having ribbons and medals and decorations and shiny things on the wall and big, mean-looking weapons sitting on the runway that don't actually do anything.
Yeah.
So
I have a solution I want to run by you, Mike.
Real quick.
And it was if we legalized hemp and at the same time weed and went back to real money like copper, gold, and silver, hemp, they used to make everything out of hemp before it was made illegal. I mean, paper was made cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly all the products were made cheaper, right? So if we legalized it, wouldn't all these businesses who could replace what they're making now and replace it with hemp, wouldn't they be able to make be in the black or positive? They wouldn't be in debt because since they're getting a resource that's real cheap, you know, it would help them. It would build them back up, get them out of debt, you know, instead of having to pay more, you know, because a tree.
I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. I'm afraid it's a little more complex than that. Yes, going back to hemp products, and a lot of places are now starting to legalize industrial hemp. It provides a much cheaper resource for paper making and so forth. But the reason we're in debt is because we're slaves to a banking system that deliberately creates more debt than money with which to pay the debt. And it's a system of enslavement.
So we could never get out?
No, not under the rules the bankers made up to entrap us. They've been playing this scam on the human race for 300 years, and the end result is always a war, a major war.
So you have to have, so in your mind, it's baked into the cake. You have to have it. There's no other.
Absolutely
voice?
not. No, absolutely not. You need to read my article, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, because the economic system that the United States started with is one that actually does work for the nation and its people. And that is where the government coins its own money, spends it into circulation to buy what the government needs. It goes through the society, powering commerce without accruing any interest, and then is taxed back in the exact same amount at the end of the cycle to balance the books. And that is a system that works for the nation and for its people. And the private central bankers hate it. They hate the idea of any nation or any people making their own money. They want a world in which everyone is forced to always borrow currency from the banks at interest. That's the enslavement mechanism.
Well, Mike, thank you for letting me talk. But I just hope, I want to say that you're wrong. I want to hope that people.
Well, Jonathan, I got to let you go. Jonathan, got to let you go. Okay, I gave you enough time here, and we're going to move to Dave in New Jersey. Aloha, Dave. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I'm calling to make a correction to the caller, the gentleman from Canada.
Yes.
It really annoys me when people call these shows and talk about firearms and they don't know what they're talking about. He referred to the SKS as a submachine gun. There's no such thing as an SKS submachine gun. The SKS rifle is a military-style semi-automatic rifle. It has a 10-round fixed magazine, semi-automatic. It is not a sub-machine gun. It is in no way sub, and it is in no way fully automatic.
Okay, point
the
taken.
SKS is legal in Canada. And I believe a lot of semi-auto rifles are legal in Canada, but I believe they're restricted to 10 rounds.
Yeah, they're trying to get that same thing down here in the United States. And, okay, all right, that's a good development. Apparently, a crawl on Fox News, Donald Trump just announced we are not going into Syria. Okay.
Thank God for that.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that one. Anyway, listen, Dave's going to let you go. We got to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining the network. So apparently that story we had earlier about Trump is trying to push back against the neocons, there is merit to that story because Fox News just announced that we're not going to invade Syria on the ground. They're backing off. They're backing down. Whew. If it's true. But, of course, you know, the war hawks, they're just going to gin up another false flag attack. More barrel bombs, more gassings, or they'll set off a nuke someplace out here and say, oh, North Korea tried to attack us and they missed. For peace to prevail, everybody must want peace. But it takes only one maniac to keep the wars going, and that's exactly what's going on here. We're going to go back to the phones. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I'll believe it when I see it. Trump says a lot and changes his mind. Hey, look, that caller about the weed and the hemp, I wouldn't worry about weed and hemp right now. I would go long gas masks and Geiger counters at this point.
I already have mine.
I mean, Mike, the war party's on the move, Mike. It's inevitable now. It just, you can feel it in the air. We've been talking about this for a while. It's been coming. Yeah, it's not coming as fast as people think it is, you know, but it's coming because they're on the move, Mike. And I really think it's inevitable now. I mean, there's just too many pieces moving around.
I'm afraid that you're right, and that, of course, I view that as a personal failure because a big reason for my doing what Claire and I have been doing for the last 20 years was we could see the path opening up to a new global war, and we've been trying to fight it just tooth and nail because everybody loses in a global war except the weapons makers and the bankers. There really is no victorious side. In fact, I had to put up that article I wrote some years ago, Majestic Memories, and I wrote it after watching the movie The Majestic with Jim Carrey because I had a lot of resonance with the story. And I'll put that article up, and you can look for it later in the day. But basically, I grew up in a town that was still feeling the effects of World War II. Young men who'd gone off and never came home, bedrooms still preserved. You know, the graves, Memorial Day was a big deal in our town. And I learned then that there really is no victory in war other than for the leaders and those who profit. Both sides lose in a war. It's only just a question of which side loses more, but they're still losing, and we need to keep that in mind. Anything else, Dustin?
Yeah, I just want to keep telling people this. This is the Russians' red line is Syria. Assad's not going anywhere. If they try to get rid of him, it's going to be a world war. This is it. This is the flashpoint, actually. I thought Ukraine was, which it could still be, but I think this is more the flashpoint now because it seems like they're moving all their eggs into that area and also in the South China Sea area.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, if one path to war gets closed off, they'll just look for another path to war. I mean, look how Roosevelt was trying to get us into World War II. He was trying to get Germany to attack our ships in the North Atlantic. Hitler wouldn't bite on that one. And so finally Roosevelt goaded the Japanese into attacking Pearl Harbor after they'd signed the Axis Agreement with Germany. And we were into World War II. And for the first couple of years, all of the military effort was over in Europe against the Nazis. And it wasn't until after Germany surrendered that they finally came on out here and took on Japan. So that's the way these things get done. And unfortunately, again, the covert interests, the intelligence communities, the John McCains, they're already looking for a way to get this going again. And it is a very, very dangerous time. And a lot of people are very scared, and they have every right to be. Dustin, we're going to let you go. I'm going to take a phone call from Michelle in California. Aloha, Michelle. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I have two questions, and then I'll hang up and listen to your response. One of them was in regards to North Korea, in regards to Park Geun-hye's impeachment.
Yes.
And wondering if you may have already covered this, but I was wondering if you thought this had any, bearing on some of the things that might be going on with the U.S. move in North Korea. We know that Prime Minister Hwang Kwan had been acting president since December, but it wasn't until March 10th that Park Geun-hye was constitutionally confirmed to be impeached. And so I didn't know, I know we've had years where there was going back and forth, reunification. There was rumors of even Japan joining in that reunification. But I just wanted to know if you believe that there was, the instability or this change of guards, as it were, in South Korea is having any play in this. And I'll just listen for your answer, Mike. Okay?
All right. Well,
first
of all, for historical and cultural reasons, Japan would not merge with either of the Koreas or both of the Koreas. But there was only a few years back talk of reunification. They called it, I think it was the Sunshine Policy. And South Korea's former president was very much on board with reunification, very much opposed to provoking North Korea militarily. So as we have seen in so many other countries, he was eased out of power, and a more pro-war, pro-U.S. individual is now in control there. And so, yeah, that's basically what's going on. All right, phone lines are clear right now. I'm going to get back and do some news. A little bit of an upset off of California, and apparently there was a lot of anti-submarine aircraft off of the California coast, and people were saying it didn't really look like an exercise because they were just staying over the same spot and well into the night. And so the speculation is that somebody spotted a submarine that wasn't supposed to be there. And, of course, they're saying it's either Russian or North Korean. Now, Russia maybe. I can't imagine Putin being that stupid. But as far as North Korea, there's something that you need to understand. The North Korea's new ballistic missile submarine is not nuclear powered. And that means it has a very limited range. If it's going to go anywhere of a significant distance, it must have a tender in attendance, a surface ship that carries extra fuel, extra food, extra water, sort of like a floating gas station. And absent that surface tender, then whatever may or may not be down there is probably not from North Korea. And they may have just gotten excited and they're chasing a sick whale or something. Did you ever see the movie 1941? It was one of the better ones Steven Spielberg did. And it actually documents something that really did happen in Los Angeles just after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, where everybody was in a war panic. And a single airplane out of place literally sparked the entire city to start shooting into the sky and panicking. And that may be what's happening here. And I bring that up because it is a danger. With tensions this high, it is very easy to make a mistake, one that could prove to be irrevocable. Ever see the movie War Games? Matthew Broderick. That was also based on a true story. Now, in the movie, it's a kid outside hacking into the defense system thinking it's a game company. But it actually really did happen where somebody at Cheyenne Mountain was playing a recorded simulation for training purposes, and the message that it was a training session didn't get through, and everybody thought it was a real Russian attack, and we came very, very close to launching those nuclear weapons that day. So that's why we got to calm all this stuff down. We could have World War III without anybody intentionally firing the first shot. Just somebody making a mistake, somebody panicking. That's what happened in the Gulf of Tonkin. When the USS Maddox had a novice sonar man who heard his own ship's propellers and thought it was an incoming torpedo. Sent the message up the chain of command. The captain of the Maddox sent another one saying it was a false alarm. President Johnson used the first report to get Congress to escalate the war in Vietnam. That's how that happened. All right, we're coming up here on a commercial break. More about the war, economy, science, and a fashion show when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And something very bizarre is going on here, where apparently the White House has released what they are calling is evidence that shows Assad's forces carried out last week's chemical attack. And it's basically a paper report that cites videos and satellite imagery as the source for the claim. But the videos and the satellite imagery are not being released. So, now looking at this statement by Donald Trump, and for the moment, let us take it at face value. I know people right now are not trusting him because he just broke one of his biggest campaign promises to us all. And so trust is going to be hard for him to regain. But for the moment, let's take it at face value. As I said before, this corresponds with the article that we had in the first hour of the show, where Trump was pushing back against the neocons. And at this point, my read would be that Trump knew right from the start that this gassing story was bogus, that it didn't make any sense. But he went along with the neocons. They probably told him the American people would love it if he did this. Certainly the corporate media and the military-industrial complex and all the neocons and the hardline warhawks all came out and said, this is great, this is wonderful, but the American people didn't buy it. And Trump is now realizing that by going along with the neocons, he has inflicted a huge amount of damage on himself. And I imagine he's very angry. He's angry with the neocons. If that story about Ivanka crying all over him to get him to bomb Syria is true, I imagine he's very angry with Ivanka and her husband, who was pushing as hard as possible for all of this. There's another story making the rounds that we can expect some more high-level firings in the White House. And I think it is overdue. Trump needs to recognize he's being given bad advice. He's being advised to do things that other people want that are not what Trump needs to be doing. Now, Steve Peisnick has basically come on out, issuing a warning to Trump, Matisse, and McMaster, saying, do not go to war in Syria. It will mean war with Russia. And like myself, Peisnick seems to feel we cannot win. And I don't think we can win. And again, as I said, the bankers who are ultimately behind all these wars, they don't care who wins or loses. They're making money off of both sides. They loan both sides money to fight the war at usurious interest rates. When it's all over, they loan both sides more money at usurious rates to rebuild. And they've done it twice already on us, and they're getting ready to do it a third time. So, now, getting on down to Turkey. Sunday is the referendum that has caused so much turmoil, both within Turkey and in several nations in Europe, where Turkish nationals are being allowed to vote remotely. And I imagine that Erdogan has got all the vote riggers in the world on double time right now, because if this referendum passes, Turkey will stop being a parliamentary democracy and will become a presidential dictatorship. And I can't imagine any ordinary Turkish citizen being comfortable with that. But seeing how much election fraud is taking place around the planet in this day and age, I think Erdogan is going to pull it off. We'll see. Now, as you know, not too long ago, there was a terror attack up in Sweden. Guy ran a truck into a crowd of people, and everybody was just shocked and horrified to find out he was an asylum seeker. And yesterday they were talking about, obviously, this open borders thing has to come to an end. We can't deal with the crime or the terror or the rapes. And the liberal globalists have come on back saying, we can keep the open borders, okay? We'll ban cars and trucks instead. See? and we'll turn all of Sweden into big piles of marshmallow and Play-Doh so that there's nothing for the refugees and migrants to harm us with. Doesn't sound workable to me, but that's actually what they're suggesting, banning cars and trucks rather than closing their borders. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take a phone call here from Steve in California. Steve, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Michael, shouldn't Syria and other countries, well, in support of Syria, but shouldn't Syria be filing charges right now in the International Court of Law on the United States for an act of war, and which then would proceed on to have an investigation to find out the truth, which we know this was a false flag? Shouldn't they be filing those charges right now?
I would agree. But unfortunately, the ICC has proven in the past to be just as politicized and corrupt as the courts here in the United States. But they should, and they should go up to the UN as well, but of course, the U.S. will veto anything that the Security Council decides they want to do.
Well, that would actually point to the cover-up itself if they veto it. If they don't even want to look into the evidence and see it, they've already got their mind made up. That should point to the world that the hypocrisy and that this is a cover-up.
I think the world already knows that. They don't need any more proof of it. The world already knows.
Yeah, I think Syria should file those charges right away. File it.
Well, I absolutely agree. But as far as the world's opinion of the U.S. government, they're not going to let some court decide for them what they're thinking. They can see what happened with their own eyes.
Right. Right. I noticed that those articles on 37 missiles that did not hit their target, that's pretty much been scrubbed from the Internet now. I'm looking around for those articles. I don't know if you still have one on your website, but I'm seeing now all 59 hit. Sean Hannity's talking all 59 hit, 100% accuracy, and we know that's an absolute lie.
Of course it's an absolute lie. Yeah, and
thank you, Michael.
All right, I didn't save the article, but I did link to it. But yeah, they're all being pulled off. I mean, I'm hearing that Twitter is already scrubbing all the messages critical of United Airlines off. So yeah, the Internet is now under government control. It's being censored. Very obviously, we live in a dictatorship where nobody has any respect for freedom of speech any longer. Freedom of speech is only for the corporate media, who are owned by corporations and controlled by the government. All right, now then, talking about up in Sweden, they're going to deal with their terror attack not by closing the borders. They're calling to ban cars. And Sweden's government, if anything, is more insane than our own. And, of course, they pride themselves on being history's first feminist government. And when Jeremy Clarkson and James Mays and Richard Hammond were up there for an episode of Grand Tour, even they were poking fun at just how over the top Sweden's government has gone in terms of political correctness. So it's just getting crazy out there. Anytime you start thinking that politics can trump the real world, you're going to be in trouble. You have to deal with reality. That applies to everybody up to and including Donald Trump. The laws of nature are not suspended for royalty. Okay, now then, we're seeing more of this information coming on out on how the Bank of England was exposed as a major force behind the LIBOR rigging scandal. This came out of BBC's Panorama program, where they got a recording from back in 2008 that shows how the Bank of England was putting pressure on other banks to keep the rates artificially low so that banks could borrow more money to paper over their debts and not pay fair market value. And in the process, of course, with the LIBOR rate artificially held low, other businesses were harmed. And some low-level people lost their jobs and went to jail, but none of the top executives at the bank. And now there's another article coming on out from Goldcore saying that if Bank of England was involved in rigging the LIBOR, it's time to go back and look about rigging of the gold market, because we know that's been going on as well. The numbers just do not add up. In a normal supply and demand marketplace, in a fair open marketplace, the price of gold would be through the roof right now. especially as the turmoil in the world cranks up. People want a safe haven for their wealth, and they know it's not those banks, it's not the pieces of paper with the colored ink on it, it's not a number typed in a computer. It's a tangible store of value. And we know how the price of gold is being rigged. It's with paper contracts. The London Daily Gold Fix is arrived at by taking the value of the physical metal that's out there and blending it in with the value of the paper contracts. Now, the paper contracts make it look like there's a huge supply of gold out there, and that drives the price down. Except the gold isn't really there for all those paper contracts. It's leveraged hundreds to one. And it's estimated there's $1 trillion exposure in these paper gold contracts. And right now what happens is when the contracts come due, if they're not renewed, they are settled with the cash equivalent of the gold plus a premium. But all it's going to take is a significant number of the investors in these paper contracts to say, this contract says you're delivering physical metal, deliver the physical metal or I'm suing. And then the run is going to be on. We could be looking at a double whammy. An economic collapse piled right on top of a global war. And that would finish the United States off, probably finish off most of the world. Be a start of a new dark ages. Now then, apparently China is now enforcing their boycott of North Korea's coal, and apparently they've started turning ships away that are still trying to go up there and find a buyer for the coal. Now that is a major hit against North Korea because much of North Korea's economy is based on their massive coal reserves and the ability to sell it around the world. And China was a major customer, and that is now cut off. As I mentioned earlier, global tensions are nudging gold a little bit higher. It's bumping up against the 200-day moving average this morning. And no doubt by nightfall, there'll be thousands and thousands of new paper contracts to try and drive it back down here again. Retail bankruptcies march toward a post-recession high. The number of retailers filing for Chapter 11 is headed toward its highest annual tally since the Great Recession, which is what they're calling the crash of 2008. And I'm sure they'll come up with another name for the next one. They don't want to use the older names because they've got such a negative connotation. They don't want to use depression because we all remember those images from the 1930s. We can't call it a depression. People will get unhappy. We'll call it a recession. We'll call it easing. We'll call it a gentle landing. We'll call it a kitten. That'll make everybody happy. Toshiba is warning of its ability to continue in its entirety as a going concern because of the losses they suffered from their Westinghouse nuclear reactor business. And their earnings are missing deadlines, and it looks like Toshiba may actually go out of business. And that's kind of a shame because their non-nuclear products certainly did okay. I've got a Toshiba here, and well, the rest of these are LGs. That's a shame. Now, there's growing concern up in Toronto, Canada, over their real estate market. It's going through today what the U.S. real estate market went through in 2007 and 2008. Land flipping, unbridled enthusiasm, unshakable faith that if you can get into any kind of real estate, it'll just grow in value and you'll turn out to be insanely rich. And what it did was blow a giant bubble, and those who got out first got that windfall profit, and everybody else took a beating. And now they're very concerned that the real estate market in Canada in general, and especially in Toronto, is very, very overpriced and is likely to have what they're calling a correction, which is another euphemism for a crash, this year. Now, over in Europe, they're having the G7 meeting. There's a lot of protests over there that are being described as anti-capitalist, and that's not true. They're anti-fascist, because the G7 is an embodiment of the principle of fascism. Corporate interest and government authority aligned together against the general population. Now, as we reported earlier in the week, Great Britain and the United States have been trying to pressure the G7 into more sanctions on Russia, because of what's going on in Syria. And the reports are that the G7 are not going along with it. They too understand that this gas attack story is bogus. They understand that Russia is not to blame in any of this mess. Mostly they understand that the existing sanctions against Russia have actually brought more harm to Europe than to Russia. And they're not going to do that. So basically that vector for annoying Putin is now shut off. Story coming out of shtfplan.com. Prepare for the coming war. It's going to obliterate the global financial system. Our economy will not survive. And they make something in there that is a relevant observation. For the last quarter of a century, we, the American people, keep voting for peace and lower taxes. And no matter who we vote for, we get higher taxes and more war. And now we're heading into a big one, and we are going to lose it. We're already losing it. Take a look around your local community at the cracked pavement, the homeless problem, the closed retail spaces, the foreclosed homes. We're already losing this war. I think future history books are going to look back and say that World War III has actually been here for quite a long time. The U.S. has been attacking and invading since 2001. We're now in our 16th year of war against the rest of the world. All right. Let's take some phone calls. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike?
Doing okay.
I was thinking Donald Trump, there's just no excuse for what he did, because if he's either a liar, and that's why he would do something like, play pretend and actually kill people and destroy an airfield because he wanted to act tough, even though he knew that, Assad had nothing to do with this. And or he's too stupid to be president, or too dumb, or incompetent if he's going to believe that garbage and listen to his daughter, let his daughter make the decision.
That was a weird one.
That's an excuse. That's totally. Why does he have all these family members in there anyway, man? This is not. I don't know of any president other than JFK had his brother, or Bobby.
Mm-hmm.
But that's about it. I mean, he's got the whole family in there. Looks like almost like the Beverly Hillbillies or something like that. I guess say New York Hillbillies. Right? He's got his in-laws, his daughter. Who else is in there making decisions? I mean, he's better straighten out, or else this world is not going to be is going to be blown up if this goes like this. I wonder, by the way, his backing down finally on Syria. Thank God for that. At least, and hopefully he'll stick to that. I wonder if Putin didn't read the riot act to Tillerson today.
That definitely could have been part of it. The fact that Russia was saying we're absolutely not going to cut off our support. If you're forcing us to choose between the U.S. and Syria, we choose Syria. That could definitely be part of it. The other part of it could be that Donald Trump is realizing that everybody said America would go along with this strike, lied to him, and he has done incredible damage to his brand, and he's probably furious about that. And again, we don't know the real mechanism. Where we should be concerned, though, is that those who still want the wars to move forward are not going to be stopped by a little thing like the president saying, I don't want to go into Syria. They'll do something else. There'll be another false flag gas attack. Putin is already warning of one that's going to take place somewhere near Damascus. We have all those assets over there. They're not there to work on their suntans. The people who want war are going to find some way to do it. The original plan for the assassination of John F. Kennedy was to frame Cuba for it in order to justify a new invasion. And the only reason Johnson called that part of the plot off and switched it over to crazed lone nut gunman Lee Harvey Oswald was that Johnson was aware of the warning Khrushchev had left Kennedy with after the Cuban Missile Crisis. The next time you attack Cuba, we're going to do a nuke strike, no pause, that's going to be it. And so Johnson cut off the part of the plot that framed Cuba for it, and he gave the military-industrial complex Vietnam to play around in. And so as much as I didn't like Johnson, you know, he definitely made the best of a very, very bad situation at that point. That's probably the reason he decided not to run for an additional term. So, I mean, that's the reason.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I saw something on YouTube about Russian plans, that the Russians plan that they could win a war with the United States and NATO in about 2 weeks. I assume they're talking about a conventional localized war. Problem is, they might, because they said the United States is too dependent on the troops moving forward. As soon as they run into heavy fire, laying down, taking cover, and waiting for air support, and which is overwhelming when you take on somebody like Iraq or Afghanistan or some of these other countries that they, you know, but that's not going to be the case with Russia. Russia's got a great air force. They've got excellent anti-aircraft missiles and all that, and guns. And their army is trained to move, to constantly move, and overwhelm. So that could happen.
Yeah, I can just see the United States trying to fight a war against a major power with all these crybaby snowflakes we saw on display following the election.
Yeah, I know. That's another thing. Exactly. We don't have. I don't think our troops don't have the morale right now. A lot of them realize this is all nonsense. And the other thing,
you've hit a very important point there. You know, our military, they're not motivated to throw themselves into the fight. They don't believe that Syria is evil, Iraq is evil, Russia is evil. They understand it's just wars of conquest. They're risking their life and limb to make a bunch of really rich people richer than they already are. And that really does not motivate people to risk getting shot or blown up.
Yeah, all you got to do is look online, look some of the comments, including a lot of veterans. And even at some of these talk shows, sometimes I'll listen to Breitbart in the morning, and their Breitbart is not the same anymore, especially with those two feminine-sounding imbeciles there, I think Marlowe and Boyle. They don't know what they're talking about, and they're getting veterans calling up and telling them, no, we don't want any part of this. We don't want to be part of this globalist war, this and that, you know. And the only good one left on Breitbart, the only good is this guy Raheem Hassan, the British guy.
Yes.
And one of the other better ones.
Okay, Mark, I got to let you go. No? Ran into a commercial. We'll be right back with more phone calls. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go back to the phones. Sherry in Texas, thank you for waiting. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. Listen, I'm still 100% behind Trump. No charges against him. I can't see that at all. Trump had no choice. I honestly believe that. I don't even need to know why. Our people will continue to move forward. If Mitt Romney had won, I couldn't say this. That would have been it.
Okay, Sherry, let me just insert a comment here. Okay. We know that Trump launched a cruise missile attack into a sovereign nation that had not attacked us on the basis of information that at worst was falsified or at the most generous was wrong. And that shows a high degree of recklessness, and that is something we cannot tolerate in the Oval Office.
I understand it, but we're only looking at it from one direction then. Trump won because the people, like your caller just pointed out, woke up enough to see the truth. The majority of people woke up enough to see the truth, or Trump wouldn't be there in the first place. That's why I think we'll continue to move forward. We have overcome the worst bumps in the road, which would have been Mitt Romney and Hillary. They could have taken us in a different direction. I don't think we'll go in a different direction now. We're already woken up enough. I mean, yes, this is very scary what happened, but these warmongers, if they can't get Trump to comply to their plans, they'll go for the jugular next. And I'm starting to pray now. There's one thing I want to be clear on. It was really important to me personally that he stay in contact with Putin. The guy that went over there,
Tillerson.
He's still there, right?
I think he's about to get on the plane to come back home. He didn't really seem to accomplish a whole heck of a lot of anything.
I can't see how he couldn't have. Well, Trump needs that open, he needs some kind of, to me, I feel comfortable knowing that Trump and Putin can be in contact with no one listening in. You know, just keep
well,
this.
The problem is that the neocons, I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're coming up on the station identification.
Okay, that's fine. I've said what I want to say.
The neocons, the staff around Trump, are trying to isolate him so that anything going in and out passes through their filters. They did the same thing to John F. Kennedy to get him to keep going down there in Vietnam. And I'm sorry, I'm glad Trump won. I'm still glad Trump won because it would be worse under Hillary, but he's turning into a disappointment. And I think this reckless act into Syria has made the world a more dangerous place and probably guarantees that Donald Trump is going to be a one-term president now. The Democrats could put up a dog catcher in 2020 and win the election.
I don't think he planned to be in there for more than 4 years anyway, because who could put up with this from them? I think the people will prevail. That's all I know. And we may live in a pretty rural society if you crash everyone's computers. But
I don't have a problem with a rural society. I'm a farm kid. Anyway, Sherry, got to let you go. Got to take a break for station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. Got a bunch of people waiting on the phone lines, and I got a reader email basically pointing out that if we do get into a nuclear war and we're all dead, we cannot move forward. Good point. Very good point. All right, Linda in Massachusetts, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Well, I got a little ray of hope from what Putin is saying and people around the world are hearing. I have 2 paragraphs from a press conference of Putin today, if I could read them.
Yes, real quick.
Okay, great. He was in a press conference with the Italian counterpart, and he was asked for his view in regard of the U.S. airstrike on Syria. His response revealed not a bashing of the new U.S. administration, but the rivalries of the U.S. deep state military financial interests that potentially pressured President Trump into the airstrike on Syria. Should anything really go wrong, Trump is who they will blame, he said. He further warns of his intelligence agencies reporting more chemical attacks that will be, so he says this. This is the second paragraph. I said this is strongly reminiscent of the events of 2003 when the representatives of the United States and the Security Council, UN, have demonstrated allegedly chemical weapons discovered in Iraq. Then began a clear campaign in Iraq, and it ended with the destruction of the country. Growth of terrorist threat and the emergence of ISIS on the international stage, no more, no less, said Putin.
Yes.
I've listened to a lot of videos of Assad also being interviewed, and, at least we're dealing with people who are telling different points of view to the rest of the world. And, maybe there will be something that's, what I felt about the strike, as angry as I am, betrayed. I feel it was illegal internationally and constitutionally, but it was open. And it kind of reinforced to people to kind of look into this more, find out that the U.S. has been supporting this covertly, and to me, in a more disgusting way, by giving support to the terrorists and the jihadists.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I have to say, Michael. I just wanted to report that to you.
Well, Putin is a very, very smart man. He's grown up in the world of real politics, and that definitely gives him an advantage. And certainly, everyone's trying to scream Russia's fault, but remember, every time the U.S. has tried to push a country to war, Putin has stepped down and said, let's make this go away. I mean, he did that the first time that the U.S. was saying Assad was gassing his own people, and Putin went over to Syria and convinced Assad to surrender all of his chemical weapons and calm that down. And which is why going on back and saying Assad is still gassing his people is ridiculous. He gave up all of his weapons. Israel's still insisting that Assad has built a secret sarin gas factory in his kitchen or some such nonsense as that. Anyway, Linda...
Awesome. Can I say one more quick thing, Michael?
Real quick.
when I did a little bit of looking into the UN report from 2013, it does say in there that it was not the civilians that were, targeted. It was Assad's military. So the preposterous notion that they would still be fighting for him 4 years later, after being gassed by him, it's just all preposterous, and that's all I wanted to say.
Well, it's preposterous to say Assad would gas his own army. There's no point in doing that, and that's why.
And that is what the UN. Well, yeah, that's what the UN said.
Yeah, but what the corporate media said was that Assad was gassing his own civilians. And again, they've been caught in another lie. All right, Linda, got to let you go. Going to switch over to Mary in Connecticut. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. This was, you woke me up to, I always was very supportive of Israel. But you were mentioning how we gassed our own people in Waco and burned them. So I went back and spent hours looking up more information because I was totally indoctrinated a couple of years ago. And basically, I saw a bunch of different videos, some government made, some FBI made, and one was local people that were interviewed, and they said how social workers went there, they never found anything. But another one was, the name of it is an ADL caused Holocaust, ? And basically it found out, Janet Reno kept saying during the questionings that she went back and referred to some very high source, and that very high source, I forgot his name, but evidently he was someone that was a deprogrammer, and he didn't have a degree in psychology or an MD or a master's or any degree in anything related. And basically he had connections to the ADL and to Mossad, and he was trying to claim that these people were dangerous. You have to go in and act, and they had suicide ideas because the people that were there, they were a group since 1935, and they never had suicide ideas, and they never abused their kids. And
yeah, it was a complete lie. What happened in short, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on Waco, in short, the BA...
No, but it wasn't just our government. We're being led astray by certain groups.
Yes, we certainly are, but basically... BATF back at the time had a string of public relations disasters, kicking down wrong doors, and murdering innocent homeowners to the point where there was serious talk in Congress of revoking BATF's police authority. And so the BATF wanted a big success story to have in the media to say, see, we're doing a good job, we're doing an essential job, don't take away our authority, don't take away our budget. And so they just decided they were going to raid this church in Waco, Texas, because it is Texas, and the church basically made their money by buying, repairing, and selling used firearms. And it may seem a little odd for a church, but it was all very legal. Mary, let me talk. It was all completely legal. In fact, when Koresh had taken over, he discovered the former head of the church had actually had a meth lab on the premises, and he called up the local police and said, I found a meth lab here, please come and take it away, and they did. And they were actually very friends. The local police were friends with the Branch Davidians and Koresh. They used to go out shooting together. Koresh would bring guns, the police would bring ammunition, and they'd have a really good time. And BATF decided they were going to raid the church, claim the weapons were illegal, and they were going to get lots of positive newspaper coverage. Unfortunately, their downfall was inviting the reporters to go along on the raid because one of them was friends with Koresh, and he called up and said, do you know the BATF is coming to raid you? So the BATF shows up, Koresh opens the front door, they shoot him in the groin, and it went downhill from there.
Oh, I know.
And so basically the only way the government could save face and avoid embarrassment was to gas the church with a banned chemical weapon and then set fire to the place. And that was basically what they did.
But the point also is that it's ADL is supposed to...
No, Mary. The point... Okay, we're going to drop Mary here. Thank you very much. The point here is that the U.S. is going around saying that any government that gasses children to death with chemical weapons needs to be bombed. Well, the U.S. government has itself used a banned chemical weapon on the women and children who were in that church in Waco, Texas. And that's why they are being hypocritical. That's why they lack the moral standing to pass judgment on anybody else on this planet. All righty, Mo in Florida. Aloha, Mo. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. You got the best information going out there. You really do. I think you say it like it is.
Thank you.
And I think you're really a good-hearted person, Michael.
Thank you.
You and well, it's deserved.
It rubbed off on me from Claire.
Yes, and I think Ron Paul rubbed off on all of us, right?
Yeah, I certainly think so. Before we go any further, I want to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates, just now rejoining the network. So, Mo, what is on your mind today?
Nothing. I just love your program because it's good to hear honesty. You may not be right 100%, but you're close, and you call it from the truth. And I just couldn't help but realize, when you listen to Ron Paul and that end of things, and I campaigned for him. You just see the contrast between truth and falseness. I mean, first, you don't harm anybody that's not harming you. It's just basic principles. The guy, I'm not religious. I was raised Catholic, but I'm not religious, just like you. But you start wondering, instead of Jesus, what would Jesus do? What would Ron Paul do? You think Ron Paul would fire missiles without investigating? This is the problem. I think they got to Trump's ego because he is bombastic and he's got a big ego.
Yes.
And, you want to be a wimp? You want to be a wimp, Trump? You're going to be a wimp. You're going to be a wimp. Fire these missiles. You're going to be a wimp. And I think all that visions he's got a patent taking over the world. I think they got to him. The guy. The only thing can solve salvation for Trump is for him to admit. And I don't think this is possible. Like you say, I think he's jumped the shark. I think he could admit he got screwed. He got bad information.
No, they're still out there. They're still out there trying to say we know Assad gassed his own people. They're not going to back off because government is very much like a religion. It operates only as long as the supplicants believe in what they're being told. And even though the government has because the government already has a huge credibility problem, they can't admit to a lie or a hoax, or it makes things worse. And yet, every time they do another one of these, it's only accelerating the loss of credibility. And I find it amazing that anybody could look at that story, that at this particular time in history, when Assad is on the verge of victory, that he would do something as stupid as gas his own people without any kind of a reason to do so. It just did not make any sense. And whether Trump got threatened, or whether he got conned, or whether he was simply lied to by those around him, it almost doesn't really matter. The image of the United States of America and the image of the Trump presidency that has gone out to the world this week is not a very positive one. It is of a government that shoots first and thinks later, and that makes the world much more dangerous.
Humility, Michael, humility. That's what Ron Paul has, but you have too. Humility. Humility is what the whole thing, that non-hubris stuff, is what we need. And that's what Trump's fatal flaw was. They saw he had clay feet, and I believe they played on his ego. But I love your show, and I'll listen to your comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, sir. And yes, I have more humble than any 10 other men you're ever going to meet. All righty, let's see. We're going to go to Fred in Missouri. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, how you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Listen, I just started probably listening to your show about 4 months ago, and I just can't tell you. I look forward. I listen to your program normally in the morning, the replay, and I've been listening to John Stadtmiller when he was doing shows with Alex Jones years and years ago. So I know John personally. But anyways, I think, wow, what a great show you have. And I've got maybe a statement here, but I also have a couple questions about where you get your information.
Okay.
My opinion is I've been involved in politics since my daughter was born. That's going back to Ross Perot days. Heavily involved. And Donald Trump was the first person I voted all these years, but he was the first person I ever voted for that actually won the election. So I was ecstatic when he got elected.
Yes.
My first indication that he was on the wrong track is looking at the people he was appointing to different sections of the government.
Yep.
A lot of red flags were going up then. And then I looked at when he was back in the Paul Ryan bill, which was horrendous. Didn't do anything. It didn't repeal anything. It was just as bad, except the only fines we'd be paying would be to, instead of the government, the insurance companies. Well, that's a good bill. So red flags are going up there that he was actually behind a bill that he never read. Big red flags. My greatest disappointment is the fact that he may have voted against the TPP. He might have been putting up a wall up, on the borders or whatever. That doesn't mean anything to me. That didn't take any thought on his point whatsoever. What really struck me when my brother called me and said, "Did you hear what Donald Trump just did in Syria?" I was going, "Oh my God." I'm, maybe not that smart of a person, but I'm going, how stupid is this man?
Yes.
And I'm going, oh my God. It's like, this guy's incredibly stupid. How did you, just even being a wise person with common sense, you wouldn't go out and attack somebody without documentation that this actually happened. And he went out there and put us all at risk. He put us he failed the biggest test he's ever had.
Yes.
He failed the test with the Paul Ryan, and then he failed the biggest test. We gave him the keys to the nuclear, and when everybody says, well, he still did some good things, I'm sorry. That doesn't mean a damn thing if it's all in ashes of nuclear fallout.
I agree with you.
No,
I absolutely agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. And we're seeing that a lot of Trump's early moves to implement some of his campaign promises are already starting to be rolled back. Now the GOP has yanked the funding for his border wall from the current House GOP budget. And so they're already pushing the country back to the way the elites want it to be, and to heck with what the American people or even Donald Trump want. And I'm disappointed in Trump intensely. I still think he's better than Hillary would have been. But this all goes back to the observation I made about him all the way back before he even won the nomination. He spent his life in the world of business. He sees the entire world as a business operation, and he's dangerously naive about the world of D.C. politics, as dangerously naive as Jimmy Carter was. Carter was completely unprepared, was completely blindsided by some of the dirty tricks they were pulling on him as president. And the same thing is obviously happening with Donald Trump. Donald Trump needs to shake up that White House. He's got to start getting rid of these neocons. He has to know they lied him into committing a war crime, and he's got to be angry about that.
Well, you know what? I have second thoughts about that also. I mean, he has people like Alex Jones and all these other people that have been telling him, and he's never mixed up the fool there. He's just got people in that will stab him in the back yesterday 10 times, over. I think there's something else going on there. I really don't think, he should have gotten rid of so many people. But, I don't know if he's that naive, because I've heard all his, for the last 15 years, the things he's said. He's pretty informed on a lot of issues. I just have a question whether or not he's that naive, because this is extremely naive. And just a judgment to say to people that, well, he gassed, Assad had gassed his people. Me as just a person with some common sense would say, well, I want to see proof. I would say that.
Yeah.
And for him not to say that just shows me that he really shouldn't be where he's at.
Well, he was shown these photos of the kids and the decontamination, and he was told that's the proof. And what he should have done is say, I need the provenance that these photos are really, in fact, of what you're telling me, because we've seen outdated photos used before, photos from the wrong location, and Trump dropped the ball. He trusted people that really were not worthy of his trust, and he's going to pay the price for that. He just bombed his second term in office.
I guess what I'd like to say is the fact he goes, "You're the lying media," and I'm going to ask you, Michael, when is the last time the government told us the truth? None.
Yeah. Well,
so why would Donald Trump be so naive to say that the people who he's relying on information on that they're going to lie to him? The government never tells the truth, and they've got, like you say, he may be naive or something, but I'm saying, I'm sorry, you failed the biggest test, the protection of the American people, protection of our soldiers, protection of our military.
All right. Well, I'm going to have to.
God knows where we're going to go here.
All right, Fred, I'm going to have to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to take a call from Werner in New Brunswick. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good evening, Mike.
Good evening.
And, I haven't called there for quite a while, but tonight I listened there about the issue about chemical warfare and the accusations that have been brought forward against President Assad.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, Donald Trump, he went off half-cocked. He should have had those information, those accusations, he should have had them verified from different sources, not just only from one or two single sources.
Mm-hmm.
But it came to my mind about, in the Bible there, the Lord said about the scribes and Pharisees, you choke at a gnat and swallow a camel. And in regard to chemical warfare, when we look at the track record of the United States military, in the Second World War, the use of incendiary phosphate, and most of the victims were civilians.
Yes.
The nuclear bombs, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, most of the victims were civilians. Then in Vietnam, nobody can tell me that they did not know what kind of lasting effects the massive use of 2.45T, the defoliant, would have on the civilian population and the people that had to make a living.
Oh, they knew how dangerous it was here because Agent Orange was actually developed here at the University of Hawaii, and there was an accident in which some students were killed. So, yeah, they knew just how toxic it was. It's based on dioxin.
Yeah, so... And dioxin is one of the most toxic materials that ever existed, man-made. And so I think it applies to, you choke at a gnat and swallow a camel. How many millions of civilians, lost their lives or got crippled, for the rest of their life?
Well, look at the firebombing of Dresden. No military purpose at all. It was just shock and awe. To tell Germany that the U.S. And the Allies had the political will to commit atrocities like that. Anyway, listen.
But, they brush it off with calling it collateral damage.
Yeah, and that's a horrendous lie. Well, gee, what about, the people under the gas attack? Let's assume that if Assad was going to use chemical weapons, he's using them against the enemy troops, and that means that the civilians are collateral damage. And it's another example of a double standard and hypocrisy by the U.S. government. Anyway, Werner, got to let you go. We're getting short on time, and I'm going to start with Glenn in Philadelphia. I may have to take you into the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I'm calling about the United Airlines thing. We don't want to overlook the original issue that caused the problem, and that is that United Airlines is short on seats. And we, the flying public, can involve ourselves so as to solve this problem for them. When we're booking our vacations coming up for this summer and everything, we should book on other airlines so as to free up some seats so that United doesn't have this problem anymore.
It's already happening. Their stock, the worth of the company dropped by almost $1 billion. People are changing reservations. And, of course, United Airlines is out there. They're mounting a media campaign to smear this guy who got beat up on their plane. And their motto is, fly the friendly skies. So it's turning into a big incident. Now, I don't want to let it be a distraction from the other more important issues. And I'm only mentioning it because they did mount a smear campaign against this doctor who was trying to get to where he needed to be to treat some patients. and said, no, I need to be on this flight. And what the United flight attendant should have done was offer financial inducements to other passengers to get them to surrender their seat. And calling the police and just picking somebody at random to be ejected, that's not going to go away anytime soon. Anyway,
their CEO Munoz is going to have the Rhapsody in Blues. That's the song they use for Rhapsody in Blue, I believe. And their CEO Munoz won some industry communications award, and then he goes on TV and tries to spin doctor and word weasel his way out of it by apologizing for the problem, but not for the other stuff. So,
yeah,
all right, sir, take care.
And the smear campaign is definitely a big, big mistake. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before I take some more phone calls here, a couple of news items here out of the world of immigration and migrants and refugees. Apparently, a migrant camp in France, the Grand Sint migrant camp, has burned to the ground following a massive fight there. Up in Germany, a young man was forced to watch while a machete-wielding refugee raped his girlfriend on a camping trip. So how's that whole thing working out for you there? And that's got to be making the people of California very nervous, because California is now enforcing their new law that is allowing illegal immigrants with criminal records to stay in California. Now, apparently down in Libya, which, like Afghanistan and Ukraine, has been turned into a slime pit by the U.S. intervention, African migrants trying to cross Libya to get to Europe are being taken prisoner and sold as slaves, including sexual slaves, for as little as $200. You didn't have that problem under Gaddafi. All right, take a phone call. Yvonne in New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi. I'm calling about, I don't know if you already talked about this, but Sean Spicer gave a press briefing, and then also General Mattis did. And they both made what I thought were really disturbing comments. Like Sean Spicer had said that President Trump, that the reason that he did all this is because of images he saw on TV.
Yes.
And then Mattis, he just went ahead and he said, oh, well, we know Assad did it because doctors saw that chemical weapons were used. Well, if doctors were treating patients and they saw that chemical weapons had been used on the patients, how does that prove who did it?
Well, you're absolutely right. There's a huge, huge hole in there. I mean, they're basically coming from the position that nobody but Assad would use chemical weapons, even though we know the U.S. supplied sarin gas to the rebels there. When Matisse says doctors, they're talking one doctor who's all over the media saying, I know Assad did it. This guy was up on terrorism charges in Great Britain. He kidnapped a couple of journalists. He's with the terrorist groups. And yet, because he's saying what the media wants to be said, he's being held up as the authoritative source. But you're absolutely right. If these people were harmed by chemicals, probably not sarin, because the people handling the bodies weren't wearing gloves, which would be absolutely mandatory if sarin were involved. It doesn't tell you where it came from. Now, Russia and Syria are still saying what happened is that Syria attacked a rebel stronghold, which turned out to be a clandestine storage depot for the chemicals that the rebels have been using on Syria's people. And it blew up, got caught in the wind, and that's what resulted over in Idlib. So there were chemicals and people died, but it wasn't the fault of Assad. It was the fault of the rebels for having these chemicals there in the first place, if you really want to think about it. But in classic politics, nobody cares about the facts or the truth. It's, I want to do this. How can I use this new event to push that agenda along?
And it's you know what else is outrageous, and it bothers me so much because I can't get over how stupid people are. If you ask anybody, like, where is Syria, they'll say, oh, the Middle East. And you're like, oh, where's the Middle East? Oh, it's all by the Middle East. But it's first of all, it's the continent of Asia.
Yes.
Which is pretty darn far away. Okay, the only water near Syria is the Mediterranean. So what are they going to do? Are they going to hop in a boat and, like, sail through the Mediterranean and reach America? It's so ludicrous when people say Assad threatens us. And I'm so upset over this. I'm so upset over it because people that we talk to that support Trump still support him. And they still think that it was a good idea that, oh, yeah, well, Assad is bad, he's a threat. My husband can't get through to anybody. He's a police officer. And all the fellow officers are just, they're all like gung-ho. Like, oh, yeah, kill Assad. And it's just like lunacy. It's craziness. And I don't know, people are buying it. They're believing this. They're believing it. They're believing the nonsense.
Some are. Most are not. I mean, I haven't met anybody in real life here in Hawaii in my travels that is buying the story that Assad is gassing his own people. When they say, oh yeah, Assad gassed his own people, just say, why did he do it? And they can't find that reason for doing it. And you're right, this claim that Assad and Syria are a threat to the United States, no, they aren't. He's not going to get in a rowboat, row across the Atlantic, and attack us. Assad is a threat to the profits of certain oil companies, but I'm sorry, I don't feel that our children should be sent out to be killed and crippled for some oil corporation's bottom line.
Right. I don't know. It's terrible.
Okay, well, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go and get some more news in before I take more phone calls. Apparently, ICE agents did a sweep in Washington, D.C., and arrested 82 illegal immigrants from 26 different countries. Now, back out in California, Maxine Waters is demanding that the United States take in 100,000 more Syrian Muslim refugees. And Maxine, how are you going to guarantee that some of these Syrian Muslim refugees aren't very angry with the United States for having been bombing their country for the last 5 years? That's what I would like to know. Okay? Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, apparently House Democrats, along with more than a few House Republicans, are trying to kill the funding for Trump's border wall, keeping it out of the budget. This is coming from the Hill. So that may go away. And again, I don't think we really need a wall. We just cut off all the financial inducements for illegals to come here. You're not allowed to work without being a citizen or legally allowed to stay here. Not allowed to rent. Not allowed to, you don't get free stuff. You cut that all off, these people are going to stay home. And illegal immigration is already in decline without the wall necessarily being there. So that's a good start right there. I don't know that we need the wall. Cheaper to put crocodiles in the Rio Grande. All right, let's see. Mateus in Canada. Aloha, welcome to the show. What is on your mind?
And trebuchets to fling them back over.
That's true. Or we get the punkin' chunkin' guys.
Right over the crocodiles.
We get the punkin' chunkin' guys out there to get the air cannons and shoot them longest distance, and most bounces gets the trophy.
And whoever gets the best shot of the day gets free food stamp next time that they're illegally in the country. Okay. So remember when Netanyahu was speaking in Congress, and we had this pathetic, embarrassing standing ovation?
Yes.
Okay, so keep that in mind. Now also keep in mind that Congress is promoting and applauding the missiles to Syria.
Yes.
Okay, so there's already like an Israel connection here. And then also keep in mind the other caller a couple days ago made a very good point that Israel lost an aircraft, most likely, probably that was launched from the Syria base. And it kind of comes together. You've got like a warmongering, control freak, like dictatorship, waging war through what's the motto of Israel? War through deception or something like that.
By way of deception, thou shalt do war. It's a quote from I think it's the Talmud, and it's the motto of the Mossad.
Right. Okay. So there's a good case here to be made that this is actually a retaliation, but a very evil one where you're murdering babies and children to make the excuse for the retaliation.
Well, Israel's never hesitated to do that before. I mean, Israel was willing to murder every single sailor on the USS Liberty to trick the United States into war against Egypt.
Right. I mean, it's just amazing how we're being run by the most vile, bottom of the barrel. But they're not even fully human because they're missing parts of humanity, like empathy and compassion. Like we got only literally retarded development. mentally and spiritually retarded people running our lives.
Yeah, that's a very dangerous situation. Well, the problem is the sociopathic personality feels no guilt. They're very convincing liars because they don't feel any guilt about lying, and that makes them very effective at persuading other people to go along with them. And sociopathic people seek positions of wealth and power and influence as necessary to their self-valuation. And it is a very common pattern. It's a tragic failing in the human psyche. But I think basically it comes down to planet Earth is like this giant septic tank, and the really big chunks are always going to rise to the top.
Yeah, definitely. Remember that chemical weapons pile picture that you talked about yesterday in Syria, in the airfield that was being bombed? And the West is using this as a kind of an excuse. So like, oh, we were going after that pile of supposed chemical weapons.
Yes.
And then you pointed out correctly that it wasn't chemical weapons, it was some other sort of weapon.
Yes.
I'd like to add to this, how ridiculous and absurd to think that the Syrians are so stupid that the place that they pile their chemical weapons is in open air storage, even though like 20 meters away is like a concrete barricade to protect from bombing, but they don't bother piling there. They just pile them out in the open. I mean, I'm even suspicious that this isn't just some sort of like high-end photoshopping. Even
no, I don't think it's photoshopping. And I think the containers were empty because they basically carry the components for cluster bombs. And but I think they were piled out there in the open because they were empty. If you look at
good point.
If you look
that makes sense. Yeah, empty.
If you look at the airbase through Google Earth, you will see that it is a little run down and dilapidated. Of course, it has been under attack. But there's a lot of trash heaps all over the place. They just pile the stuff up there, and that's really what it was, I think. Okay?
Right. Okay, well, I'm really, I feel like giving up politics. Anarchism is starting to sound appealing. I'm really heartbroken what's happened with Trump. Whatever the reason is, the effect is that we all kind of got a bit duped. Even if that wasn't the plan, even if Trump didn't mean it at the beginning, the end result, the effect, is that we're all getting screwed. And the globalist agenda is going forward, and I kind of want to quit politics. I don't think it can be changed from the top down anymore. I think it can only be changed from the bottom up, and I'm not even sure what that means.
Well, again,
so
we do not advocate violent revolution because that just justifies the government declaring a national emergency and throwing what's left of the Constitution into the shredder. I still think we're looking at a Soviet Union-style collapse of the U.S. government and economy, and we have to be prepared to take care of ourselves, literally off the grid for 3 to 4 months while we form a new republic in this land. So thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. And let's see. I'm going to do some news, and then we'll come back to our remaining phone calls. We're getting close to the end of the show here. Now, do you remember a while ago there was a store that was burned down, and there was a note left that was signed from White America, and was obviously a hate crime, and they finally caught the arson. Turned out to be a black guy. Another hate crime hoax. And I'm beginning to think that pretty much all of those hate crimes are hoaxes. And again, go back and ask, what are they trying to accomplish? They're certainly not doing anything to build public support for their point of view, or the point of view that the hate crime is blamed on. That's why so many of them are fake, just like most terrorist attacks are fake. False flags to blame on a third party to make them look bad. When you're looking at a particular group or a particular country, what you do is you say, who benefits from this act? What are they trying to do? And does what I'm being told they just did move that purpose forward or hinder it? And if it hinders it, you're looking at somebody's false flag. Always think very carefully about what you're being told, especially in this day and age when the lies are just hitting the flood stage. Okay, let's see. We're going to go to Christy in New Mexico. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I have questions in my mind about Trump's possible misperceptions. One, did he not know that his base was voting for policies and not the man, in the sense that I don't believe for the core of his people that we're involved in a personality cult. Maybe he's involved in a personality cult. Did he not know that his core is anti-war?
He should have known that, and but again, his advisors may have told him that polls are showing the American people will love you if you attack Bashar al-Assad, and he just got a real wake-up call on that one.
Right. The next one is the lying around the war. To me, implicitly, that shows that Trump believes that we're stupid, and that it's okay to foster a false reality. That's where the biggest betrayal, to me, seems is the lying, and that we wouldn't know. And I question his motto. I think the motto should be Americans first, because now I have questions about what he means by America. And the last thing is, I think we should start a movement called Let's Make Politics Illegal.
I like that last one. I definitely like that last one. So I think those of us who are being objective are very disappointed in Donald Trump. I imagine a small group of his supporters were in love with the personality and the man, and they're going to continue to support him, like that caller we had earlier, who's, I'm still 100% behind Donald Trump. Okay, fine, if that's what you want. But I have to be honest here. I'm disappointed in Donald Trump, and whether he got used or lied to by his advisors, or he actually was dumb enough to fall for that Assad gas story. The bottom line is, the end result is, he's harmed the image of the United States around the world. He's harmed the image of himself. He's portrayed his administration as reckless and willing to launch wars based on unproven allegations, and that is going to make other countries around the world, especially the nuclear nations, very, very twitchy around that button, that launch button. And everyone talks about how wacko crazy North Korea's leadership is. Look in the mirror at how our leadership now appears to the rest of the world following this cruise missile attack on the basis of bogus information. That's not the picture of sanity and calm and wise leadership that's being projected to the rest of the world.
Right. Right.
Okay.
He cannot lie to us. That's his big mistake.
Yeah, that is his big mistake.
That's what politicians do.
Well, see, he didn't come into this as a politician. He came in as a businessman, but he's been contaminated by that society. He's being told that the lies are still working, and that in and of itself is yet another lie. Trump needs to clean house and get some advisors in there who are not politically compromised. Got to let you go. Christy will be right back for the final segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, welcome back to the show. Last segment of our program today. Brendan in San Francisco, welcome back to the show. What is on your mind?
Mike, if you look at the grand chessboard and all the plays that are being made, everything is interconnected. The bombing of the Middle East, creating migration, destabilizing countries, and the final piece in the chessboard is collapsing the United States to implement the New World Order. We're the one final piece standing against it. Now,
I take issue with that because because you're proceeding from a false assumption. Russia and China are the two.
Can I make my point? Let me make my point. My point simply is, get all of our troops out of the country, and we know there are sleeper cells in the United States. That's a fact. It's been proven. Hollow out the United States with our troops overseas, and then attack the U.S. to make your final grand play.
Okay.
That's where I see this going.
I disagree. I mean, the United States government, for the most part, with rare exception, is fully on board with globalism and the New World Order. That's why they're allowing the refugees in and the illegal immigrants, and they're definitely following that agenda. It is Russia and China who are the two main obstacles to the New World Order, and that's another reason why they're trying to gin up a war against them. So, Brendan, we're going to...
China is on board with globalism.
Okay, Brendan, okay, hang on. We're going to switch over to Nick in Southern California. Nick, what's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I actually agree with you on the Russia and China. They are trying to bring a lot of transaction back to the gold standard, and that's actually going to kill the dollar. And I have heard other people say that once the dollar is killed, that's going to stop a lot of the wars. Why I actually called, well, you covered it right after I called in. And Trump's inner circle, I think, is lying to him.
Yes.
Even the polls that they may be showing him that say, oh, America and your base like the fact that you did this, I think they're lying to him even to that extent. I think he is completely cut off from the reality of what the American people are thinking.
Yeah, I think that may be the case, although if Trump or one of his trusted people are going out on social media, they're going to realize the reaction is not a good one. Certainly, even the corporate media has to report on the reactions by other world leaders. And outside of Theresa May and Angela Merkel and Francois Hollande, the condemnation has been pretty much global for this ham-handed stunt.
I agree, Mike. Thank you for taking my call. And aloha.
Aloha. Thank you very much. All right. No more phone calls. We're out of time here. And the last story here is apparently the FBI has released an interview with Tamerlan Tsarnaev taken before the Boston bombing. And in this interview, he denied any Islamic extremist views, but reported 4 mysterious men tried to contact him 2 years before the bombings. So it's another confirmation that the Tsarnaevs were very much known by the FBI. They were set up as patsies, is what happened. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here. Claire and I have got some shopping to do this afternoon, very important stuff. And we'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Please make a point of going out and sharing with everybody the reasons why Assad gassing his own people was a ridiculous story to begin with, and how close we are to ramping up a war that could go nuclear. We're going to lose this one. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.